that peeking behind the bars? That's Hannibal. Who's that played by 4 different stars? That's Hannibal. And whose face is detachable? That's Hannibal. And who's everybody's favorite cannibal? That's Hannibal. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Welcome to the
Macabre Podcast Universe.
And
Did you just have a stroke?
No, I did not.
Oh.
You started going, and I liked your passion, so I just wanted to listen in.
This is the podcast where we exist to prove people wrong when they say sequels are never better than the originals.
That is exactly right, Jordan. And to this whole month, I believe it's been this month, we've been covering the Hannibal series. And the Hannibal series is a very odd series. And this movie is no exception, and also at the same time, kind of an exception to the oddness of it. And we're covering today Red Dragon.
Yes.
Now, if you've been following along with us, you've heard us talk about Manhunter, which is based on the same exact book.
Yes.
So it is the same...
Source material.
Yeah, source material.
It is the same story.
It's the same story.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that is ultimately the downfall of this movie.
Yeah.
Is that we've already seen it, but done by, instead of a not so good person who's just like an okay director, it's done by like one of the great American directors. That being Manhunter by Michael Mann. And this movie by someone we're going to talk about in a little bit. Mm-hmm. But I'm not going to mention his name quite yet. So... what was your experience with this movie?
I have seen this quite a while ago. I feel like it might have been a blockbuster rent / it's a movie that's been on TV a lot. I want to say AMC, but just a channel like that.
Yeah.
And I remember as a kid, it freaked me out a lot, and I don't even remember what parts they were. Well, I do remember. I think I saw the part of him going down the street in the wheelchair on fire.
Yeah.
And that really freaked me out. And then the whole tattoo thing freaked me out. And this, I had never seen Manhunter, so didn't know that was a movie.
Right.
And then when I watched it, I remember really liking it. But having, being at this point now in this series and being at this point in my life, I think that from when I saw it till now, my tastes have changed a lot.
Yeah. Well, I can totally see how if you have not seen Manhunter, if you watch this movie, you're like, oh yeah, this is a cool thriller.
Because it's a good story, no matter what.
Yeah. But when you see Manhunter and the fact that they didn't really... the things they added and changed about the story were either really inconsequential or kind of just not that interesting of changes. You know, like adding more scenes with Hannibal isn't super interesting after having seen Silence of the Lambs and a whole movie specifically about Hannibal. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. It's like this movie just sort of exists.
Yeah.
Is how it feels.
Yeah.
And I think...
it's like a movie no one asked to be remade, but they did it anyway.
Yeah, but at the same time, so many people didn't see Manhunter. It was like, it was just a matter of time before they remade it.
Just a weird, blind spot in film history.
Yeah. But I remember when we were recording and when we finished watching Manhunter, there were a couple things where you were like, well, I'm excited about Red Dragon because I remember that movie kind of doing certain things maybe better or in a way that you thought maybe you would think was better. Mm-hmm. And then when we watched it, I have a note on here. I'll just skip to it because I took handwritten notes this time, folks. Jordan drew a skull. She grabbed the notebook. We still had about an hour left of the movie. Grabbed a skull, put a dash... drew a skull, and wrote, "I'm bored to death." So I think she liked Manhunter a little bit more.
Yeah.
But again,
there is some interesting stuff in this movie, though.
There is. And like I said, I think the take of this movie is, if you haven't seen Manhunter, this is a cool movie.
Yeah.
Directed by a bad guy.
Yeah.
But if you have...
they got a great cast.
The cast is great.
This is an all-star cast.
And I wonder how much more I would have liked it had I not seen Manhunter. Uh-huh. Because even something like, maybe I should save it, but Edward Norton, I like Edward Norton a lot, but I feel like his performance compared to William Peterson is like basically not good if you compare the two. I'll get into that a little bit more. That's actually quite the overstatement.
You were saying it while we were watching the movie.
Yeah, I didn't connect with him pretty much at all.
Yeah.
Which there's a reason for that, but there's like too much right off the bat. And I'm also, folks, I'm just so excited because
gosh, please stop talking about it.
I got some new gear, so hopefully the audio quality is going to be a little bit better on this episode.
You won't shut up.
I'm just excited, Jordan, and I'm not going to allow you to damper that because this is fun and exciting. It's like I got a new toy.
Yeah,
and it's beneficial for all of us. So, but here's the thing that we have to talk about. Is this movie was directed by someone who we're going to add to our list of He Who Shall Not Be Named. Now, we all know, if you've been listening to this podcast, if we had like a Wikipedia of our podcast, one of the things would be they refer to a certain film producer who used to work with Quentin Tarantino a lot as He Who Shall Not Be Named, and we don't say his name on the podcast. We're adding a new entry today. I'm going to say his name once, and then if we say it any time throughout the rest of the episode, it'll be a beep. His name is Brett Ratner, and he directed X-Men: The Last Stand, Tower Heist, the new Hercules with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and at least one of the Rush Hour movies, but I think he did all of the Rush Hour movies.
Oh, okay.
And he, during the Me Too movement, was exposed as being a very not good person. You can look it up yourself if you'd like. We're not going to rehash that stuff, but
the movie's not about, or this episode is not about that.
No, but it does. When you read something like that, you're kind of like, oh man, I wish I would have just torrented this movie instead of bought it legally because I don't want to put money in this guy's pocket. But
I get it. Yeah.
Hopefully, it just went to the actors or something. So that's that, and he's ring the gong, Micah. I'm going to add a gong in there.
Yeah.
He's been added too. He Who Shall Not Be Named. So the screenplay to this movie is written by Ted Talley. Now, that might be familiar because Ted Talley wrote the screenplay for Silence of the Lambs, which I already told Jordan. And so she's just like, I know. But it's kind of just interesting because if you remember last week, they asked him if he wanted to write the screenplay for Hannibal, and he said, no, I think the book's really gross, and he didn't want to write it.
Amen, brother.
But then he comes to this movie, and he's like, yeah, I'll write it. Okay, so then we have music by Danny Elfman.
Yes, and it shows.
Yes, pretty good score.
Yeah.
It's a little, like, over the top.
It's very big. But it's a Danny Elfman score.
Yeah, you don't hire him for subtlety.
Yeah.
You know?
You're going to get a, I don't know what you would call it, but like a choir of, at some point.
Yeah. What is your favorite Danny Elfman score?
Well, he did Nightmare, right?
Yes, he did.
It would be that one.
That one.
But, I mean, Tim Burton's always got really good scores because he's usually got Danny Elfman doing them. So
yeah. He always has, his scores are so frenetic and energetic. And they're just dun, 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 dun,
particularly
dun, dun, dun.
remember buying specific songs from Alice in Wonderland, the Tim Burton remake.
So
Wait,
something
was
good
that
did
Danny
come
Elfman?
from it.
That
I
was Danny
believe
Elfman.
he scored all but maybe
sure.
one Burton movie. But yeah, my favorite is the Spider-Man score. He has some great themes
Which
in there.
Spider-Man? The Tobey Maguire?
Yeah, he did those, and he did the and that's such an iconic score to me.
Yeah, Danny Elfman. Oh man, I was watching the what is that Disney documentary called? Like the
Imagineers. Yeah.
Okay. I was watching the documentary and they were talking about the Haunted Mansion that they were putting in, I think Hong Kong or Shanghai Disney. I can't remember which one, and I'm kicking myself for not remembering. And everyone needs to watch the documentary. It's super cool, but Danny Elfman did the music for that ride.
For which ride?
For the ride through we watched with the monkey. Mystic Manor or something
Mystic Manor in China, yeah.
Yeah. And it was just like, I was watching it and there's this guy who looks, kind of like your average, not average, but your kind of like typical artist, quirky person. And he's really like kind of zany.
Uh-huh.
And he's got he's got kind of like funny glasses. To me, they're kind of funny.
Yeah.
And I think someone says like Danny or something like that. And I was like, wow, Danny Elfman. And he's kind of like geeking out over they had little miniatures of the ride. And he was kind of geeking out over it. Very cool.
Danny Elfman looks the way I'd imagine after hearing his music it sounds.
And it makes more sense than most things in the world that him and Tim Burton collaborate so often.
Absolutely. On cinematography, we have Dante Spinotti, who did the cinematography for Manhunter. But he did not do the cinematography for any other Hannibal movies.
They let him do a do-over if he felt like it.
How weird is that?
Because definitely I think the script is different. No, take that back. Like a lot of the set, it's just a lot of it's different in the way that the movie looks.
Yeah,
and I'm curious if it was like a fun challenge.
It's
to make
really,
it look different.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I know. So the thread that we've sort of talked a little bit about, but we haven't totally dived into all the way, is that Dino De Laurentiis, he produced Manhunter. He did not produce Silence of the Lambs, but then he produced Hannibal, and then he produced this movie. So I wonder how much of that is like, well, Dante Spinotti did a great job. Let's just have him do this movie again? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's very weird. And I did see something, and this is just a little teaser for the guest, because I don't think a lot of the people who listen to this are going to want to watch Hannibal Rising, because, nobody likes that movie.
Yeah.
But there's an interesting fact about why that movie and why that book were written that kind of blew me away and is kind of sad, I think, in an artistic way. So tune in next week to hear more about that. This movie, though, Red Dragon, comes out October 4th, 2002, so like 2.5 years after Hannibal. The budget was $78 million. Domestically, it makes $93 million, and worldwide, it makes $209 million. And Hopkins was initially hesitant to have Hannibal in 3 movies, his Hannibal.
Yeah.
And so he initially was like, I don't know. Then I think he read the script and, saw Ted Talley was going to be on it and thought, let's do it. And Talley signing on helped secure Ray Fiennes and Edward Norton, because they both didn't like the movie Hannibal.
Oh, okay.
So they weren't interested in doing it, but when they saw he was writing the screenplay, they were like, okay, we'll do it.
Oh, interesting.
And the tattoo took 8 hours to apply. Wow.
And it's all real.
Yeah, they did a real tattoo on him. That's what I got. That's it.
Okay. Actors, we've not covered Edward Norton.
We have on our second episode ever, The Incredible Hulk.
Cool. We have not covered Harvey Keitel.
We have not, no.
Okay. Harvey Keitel is Mr. White in Reservoir Dogs. He's in Grand Budapest Hotel, Pulp Fiction, Bad Lieutenant, Mean Streets, a very early Scorsese movie that's amazing, that he's really good in. And he's in Scorsese's first movie.
Yeah, Who's Knocking at My Door?
Mm-hmm.
And Mean Streets is like the first bona fide, all accounts, Martin Scorsese classic.
Starring Harvey Keitel.
Yeah. His other movies before that, we've seen, I think, 2 or 3 of his movies before that. That might be his 3rd or 4th.
What's before that? Besides the one we just talked about.
Boxcar Bertha, which we haven't watched.
Okay.
I don't know where Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore takes place. That one's after me. I think Mean Streets is his 3rd movie.
Yeah, I thought it was like really early.
So that's his first like 100% out of the park, like, amazing masterpiece.
Yeah. So if you
worth a rewatch.
Yeah, if you like Scorsese, watch Mean Streets.
It's so good.
So what's fun about Harvey Keitel is he is a Quentin Tarantino guy, a Wes Anderson guy, and a Martin Scorsese guy. What a wonderful career this man has had. And he's so good.
Do you remember he's in like 2 scenes of The Irishman? And you're just like, I can't believe this guy.
I can't good.
With a look, this guy.
Emily Watson plays Reba McClane. She is in Punch Drunk Love, Gosford Park, Breaking the Waves, Chernobyl, the show, King Lear, a Little Women remake, or like
Not the Greta Gerwig one.
Yeah. She plays Marmee. I think that's mom.
Yeah, it is.
And she's in Kingsman. I mean, she's in a lot of other stuff.
Like the Kingsman, like
that franchise.
Action movies?
Yes.
Okay.
With Taron Egerton.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, she's good. She's really good in this movie. And of course she's amazing in Punch Drunk Love. I think that's all I've seen her in, actually, of what you listed, but she's good. Really good.
And then Mary Louise Parker plays Graham's wife.
Yeah.
She's in Red, the show Weeds. I think she is like...
She's the lead of that show.
I think she's Weeds. She's the titular weed. She's in R.I.P.D., Red 2, Red Sparrow, Mr. Mercedes.
Which, side note on R.I.P.D., your mom or someone in your family bought, this is just for the audience, they bought that movie and then they bought it a second time. And I think you guys had seen it in theaters, so I don't know who...
I've never seen that movie. Don't lump me in with that one.
Someone in your family saw this movie and they bought it. And then they bought it again, and I think they just forgot that they bought it. I don't know who is so into R.I.P.D. And then they kept trying to give me the movie as a gift, and I'm like, no, I don't want this.
My dad is a sci-fi fan, and he likes even crappy ones. They're also big Jeff Bridges fans, and then there have been a couple Christmases growing up where my parents bought each other the same present. My dad also got my mom into Pitbull. Fun fact.
Mr. Worldwide himself.
My dad would... do kind of the stereotypical husband thing and buy a bunch of crap on Christmas Eve. And he bought her, yeah.
Actually,
he would buy her other stuff, but that was just a lot of like stuff she didn't want. And he got her a bunch of CDs, and he got her a lot of Pitbull for some reason, and she now really likes Pitbull.
It was probably a joke. He probably did it just as a joke.
She will listen to the Pitbull's channel on Sirius XM.
Oh man.
Yeah.
He's very when I hear his music, it kind of hurts my ears a little bit.
Yeah.
Like I don't like it that much. Yeah.
That's it for me.
Okay. So of course we've talked about Ralph Fiennes because we've covered Harry Potter. And for some reason, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince is our #1 downloaded episode by a long shot.
That's right.
But Ralph Fiennes, let's talk about Ralph Fiennes a little bit in this movie.
You don't like his performance, if you're asking me about it.
No? I think he's good. I don't think it doesn't get near as it doesn't get in my head like the previous movie.
And I don't think it's performance. It's because of his performance. It's because of how it was written.
Yeah.
That's what I think is the big difference is for this movie. Because in the last movie, they made him seem they made him seem the same in both movies in terms of like what he might struggle with. And Manhunter, they got into it a lot more, which was more interesting.
Yeah.
Like why he would kill people in a certain way. But then when we were introduced to him, he seemed like a really like modern artistic person just based on decor of the house.
Yeah.
All that stuff. And then in this movie, he lives in a decommissioned nursery home where they reveal that's where he was raised by his grandma. And his grandma, I'm assuming, like she abused him in a number of ways.
Yeah.
So it's like he's still living in this place where he was abused. So he's a battered soul.
Yeah.
And they I don't know why they chose to do that. Oh, I forgot to look up the synopsis.
Oh,
I can't remember I'm curious which one's real and why they chose to do, like, if this one's not real, why did you choose to do it? The only thing I can think of is I feel like during this time that was more in.
I feel like this is probably more true to the novel because remember in Manhunter, and folks, if you're like, man, they're going to keep comparing these movies.
They're the same movie. They're the same movie.
That is what we're going to do. Yeah. So in Manhunter, I feel like Tom Noonan, he's the serial killer. It's more like context clues of who he is. And because of his performance, which is just unbelievable, it really gets under your skin and you get it. You really get it. Whereas in this movie, I think they try to get more into the actual Red Dragon portion of it.
That's true.
And in Manhunter, they don't really... they don't really get into that part of it.
It feels like in Manhunter, the police, like the investigator, spent more time trying to figure out who he is as a person. And then in this movie, they kind of just like reveal it.
Yeah.
With like kind of when they introduce us to the character, which you hear like an old woman berating him for like
Yeah.
wetting the bed and is like pointing out his facial deformity, which is just a cleft lip. So like it's just interesting how different that is, and how they chose to reveal it more in those different ways.
Right. My problem with Ralph Fiennes in the movie has nothing to do with his performance. It's that you put a cleft lip on the guy and he still looks great.
Oh, you think he is good looking?
I think he's
too villainous at this point in my life. He's played too many villains that he creeps me out. Oh wait, it's also because of this movie he creeps me out. Because when I did see it as a young kid and saw it, like it's one of the first things I saw him
that we're
in.
talking about.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Like when it was on TV.
Yeah.
And it was probably one of the situations where I'm asking my dad, like, "What's this about?"
Yeah.
And seeing him and knowing that he's the bad guy, he has always given me a weird feeling.
Yeah. See,
But you think he looks great. So I guess this is your Javier Bardem moment.
Well, I just think Tom Noonan in the previous movie just really, like, you understand when a blind woman falls for him and how he has been self-conscious his entire life. And in this movie, it's a little like, there's like a really great looking British man. Like,
I think that you're thinking
has, like,
that the casting is just a little bit better physically.
Yes. I think it's not an acting problem; it's a casting problem. I think in this movie,
Sure.
and it is slight. I'm digging into the weeds.
She is blind, so she doesn't know that he's good looking.
Yeah, but for him to be so self-conscious about how he looks, it's
yeah.
Dude, I don't look that good.
Yeah.
So but anyway, the other person I want to talk about is Edward Norton. I almost said Edward Jones.
But the investment company. Yeah.
But so he's in this movie, and I love Edward Jones. You
love Edward Norton.
I love Edward Norton. But you said something really interesting about his off-screen persona that colored the way you saw him in this movie.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Well, I said I hope that he gave the director a really bad time.
That's
because
right.
the guy sucks.
Yeah.
Because Edward Norton is known for being extremely difficult of an actor.
Yes. And I think he has this edge to him where you need a...
That's interesting that he's acting with Anthony Hopkins and he's known for being like a stickler for things. Like Edward Norton. Like it's more like maybe an art form to him. And from these quotes that you've read from Anthony Hopkins, where it's just a job, you show up, you clock in, and you do your work. I wonder what that dynamic is like.
Well,
it's like sorry, let me just finish this.
Okay.
Where like the director says cut, and Edward's like storming off, like really pissed on how he delivered that line, even though that's probably the take they put in the movie. I don't know Edward Norton. This might not be how
you're making up a scenario. Yeah.
But like, and then Anthony's just like, okay, it's tea time.
Well, I feel like, and even with those quotes, Anthony Hopkins is definitely concerned about the artistic part of it, but he's a little less like, oh, I'm a killer and I need to, go to some country and go into international waters and try human flesh in order to play Hannibal. He's just like, I don't know, I'm just an imaginative guy and I just pretend I killed someone, and then when it cuts, I go have dinner with my wife. It's a good job.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that Edward Norton, when he's at his best, the exception being when he's in Wes Anderson movies, because for some reason Wes Anderson can
direct anybody,
get weird humor out of people. But he's weaponized best when he has something.
Weaponized. Wow.
Yeah.
Actors are weapons.
Well, yeah, they are in a way. But when he has something in him that's he's really struggling with, or like he needs a darkness to him.
Okay.
So when I think about like American History X, Fight Club, especially his probably best performance, and Birdman, it's like he has these messed up things he's wrestling with. And in this movie, I know he is wrestling with his past.
But maybe you're thinking he didn't wrestle enough.
He didn't wrestle enough with his past, and he doesn't have that deep, dark stare that William Peterson has, where he's like, I don't know, I just am giving up, kind of, but I got to do this, I guess. This is like, I'm a good guy, and I'm morally not incorruptible, and I've been stabbed once, but it's okay. And to me, I'm like, I'm watching it and I just go, I just don't buy you as this character.
But not as convincing. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think it's, again, a casting problem.
Yeah, and I know I said in Manhunter that I was like, I think Edward Norton did a better job. Just from my memory, I'm taking it back.
Yeah.
I think William Peterson did a better job. However, I just don't think the character is my favorite.
Yeah.
It's a little too on the nose for me. But like I said, I think in the first episode, like this is like when that character was like maybe first seen on TV.
Right.
Like the haunted detective. Kind of.
And we would encourage our listeners, particularly those of you who have not written a review for us yet, to write a review and tell us if you preferred our Red Dragon episode or our Manhunter episode, just as the movies did, and maybe compare it, detail it out, and make sure you leave 5-star review on Apple.
Yeah.
And
it doesn't actually
detail
accept that type of review unless it's a 5-star.
That's true. And yeah, so we are going to need that to happen for those of you who have not made reviews yet, and we eagerly anticipate that. But let's get into the movie now.
Okay.
So one thing that's kind of fun is you see Hannibal at a symphony.
Mm-hmm.
And he's sitting there, and he is just steaming because there's a flautist who is not
playing well,
not quite getting it right, and he can tell.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go to dinner, and Anthony Hopkins is with the coastal elites.
He's on the orchestra board of this prestige orchestra, and he is hosting dinner. And they're talking about the flautist has gone missing. Like, oh, it's not really a shame. He sucked. Chuckle, chuckle, chuckle. And then he says some other words eloquently, and they start eating dinner, and they're like, what is this? Like, this is so good.
Yeah.
And he's like, if I told you, I'd have to kill you or something.
No, he says, if I told you, you wouldn't want to try it or something like that, which that's fun Hannibal stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, he's everybody's favorite cannibal.
Yeah.
He's Hannibal.
Yeah.
So, we have all that, and then we see Edward Norton come in and talk to him as a psychiatrist, and he's kind of talking about this killer.
So, yeah, Hannibal is a forensic psychiatrist as well as a psychiatrist.
Yeah, so he's like consulting on the case.
Yeah.
And then
Edward Norton says, I figured it out. He's eating the body parts because these bodies that are being found are missing certain parts of the body. And he's like, I don't think they're trophies. I think that they're eating them.
Yeah.
So he's on to Hannibal, and he's like, how come you didn't even figure that one out, Hannibal? And Hannibal's like, well, I'm only human.
And then, Graham walks over, opens up a book, and it's talking about like cooking body parts or something like that.
And there's like notes in it and stuff.
Yeah. And then he turns around, Hannibal stabs him.
Stabs him like and twists the knife kind of stab. Those are always hard to watch.
Yeah. And so this is it's laying the groundwork. I think this is kind of fun because we didn't get to see it in Manhunter, but I definitely prefer the ominousness, if that's even a word, of walking into the cell with this person you don't know who it is, and then finding out that they have this weird history. Yeah. I think that's much better, but it's also like, if you're going to remake it, you may as well add this scene.
I liked it. I like the addition. And I think it's because of what we have already.
Right.
So, but Then
we're back to, we're into the future.
Several years later, according to the movie.
Yeah. And I have to sidebar temporarily on this. It's just so funny when a movie feels the need to point out a time change, because usually we can figure it out by context clues, but it's even funnier when they're not specific with the time. So it should have said, 7 years later, but it says several years later. It's not even, so what was the point of telling us that it was years later if you're not going to be specific about it?
Yeah,
I just think that's so silly.
So he is now living in Florida with his wife and son, as you all know. And Harvey Keitel approaches him. He plays Crawford in this movie and is trying to get him to come work on this case. It promises that he won't let him get in too deep.
Yeah.
But they're at a brick wall, and families are being murdered, whole families, and they believe they have 3 weeks until the next one.
Yeah. I do think it's cool that in all 4 of these movies, the Crawford character plays it way different.
Yeah.
So that's kind of fun. I like how Harvey's playing it.
The Manhunter scene of this movie is way more compelling.
Oh, yeah. I mean, seriously, every single scene is better in Manhunter. It just is. I can't think of a scene I like more
I just
in this
feel
movie.
like Michael Mann was intentional with every single shot in that
Yeah.
movie. And this one, it's just a lot of cuts because someone else has started talking.
Well, it feels like, and I get this impression from He Who Shall Not Be Named, he's kind of he's a work for hire director. He's not like a Paul Thomas Anderson. He's not gonna like.
It's like, hey, this Hannibal character is pretty proven. People kind of show, they show up, they pay for the ticket. You want to make a movie?
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, I'll make a movie. I mean, I haven't seen Rush Hour, so maybe he does some interesting
they're really
stuff
popular.
there. And it does seem like that's kind of its own thing. But this is it's a good looking work for hire movie, but it is a work for hire movie. I think
this movie looks a lot better than Hannibal, I think.
Yes. I put a little asterisk on it because I think this movie looks more appealing to me, but I think Hannibal is a much more artistic movie than this one.
I agree with that, definitely. And I do think, like, location-wise, set design is more impressive in the other movie. Absolutely. Yeah. But I think that movie just looked so blue.
Yeah. But
and washed out.
But what I will say that I like about this movie, and I said it in the Silence of the Lambs episode, I said, I hope that each one of these movies looks vastly different from the others, and I've been loving that part of it.
Yeah.
Even when it doesn't work for me, I'm like, that's so cool that this is this weird franchise that doesn't look like itself. Because we're so used to watching, Marvel movies where they all look the same, and they're starting to get a little more artistic, but still, it's like they fit in a universe. And this is like, nah, it's a different director. He's just going to do his own thing.
Yep. So we're, Graham accepts. He goes and he checks out the first murder scene. All the same stuff, story-wise. Of course, it all looks very different. He still is talking to a tape recorder.
Yeah. I mean, it is we find out at some point that it's like 1980 or whatever. So it is still
not 1980, but okay.
Oh, I thought they point that out at some point.
Not in my memory.
Oh.
You know how...
Yeah, because this takes place in the chronology of Silence of the Lambs, so it's in the 80s.
Okay, well, 1980, it's got to be later than that.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The year of 1980 is what I'm referring to.
I understand.
So yeah, that's, we get to be with Edward for a little bit longer in this. Seeing him try to understand what's going on here.
Yeah.
Kind of like what we've said, though. It's like, yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think that this movie wasn't more graphic than like the last movie or Manhunter. I was thinking that maybe they would go there.
Yeah.
Like they would go uber graphic.
Well, especially because Hannibal, as we discussed, is like a very graphic movie.
Yeah, and I think we're starting early 2000s. We're starting to get into like we went through a period of crazy graphic.
Yeah, absolutely.
For like a R movie.
Yeah,
and of course this is an R movie because of the content, but they don't make it super gory. I think.
No, this is like besides if you cut like a couple episodes of F words, this is on like AMC if it was a show.
Definitely.
Yeah. Actually, from what I hear, the Hannibal show is maybe more intense than this.
Yeah.
So, so he checks out the house, and we see that Philip Seymour Hoffman is the reporter in this movie.
And he plays it way different.
I thought he did a good job of
He's just tired.
He's just a tired old reporter who's not old, but just kind of...
Well, he seems like the scummy beat reporter when Stephen Lang in Manhunter, I think, was going for a gotcha journalism. I want to be well known for being the gossip guy. When Philip, I think, is going more for he's willing to be a scuzzy person to get his story.
Yeah. And
I love it.
Yeah. And I mean, I can't help but love anything Philip Seymour Hoffman did.
He's so good.
I still haven't seen a movie of his that was even close to a bad performance.
Yeah.
I always forget, you have not seen Capote, right?
I have. Well, on TV I have.
Oh, okay. That's, okay, cool. Because if not, I was like, I need to get that from the library and we should watch that.
You should get it anyway because I would like to watch it. I haven't watched it since reading In Cold Blood.
Oh, okay. Great performance. And that's a performance where he does do some out there stuff.
Yeah.
And if you know anything about me, you know that sometimes that stuff is a little annoying to me, but I think it really works in that movie.
Mhm.
It makes sense that he won an Oscar for it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
hands down. So I'm just trying to, because we've talked about this plot, it's kind of interesting. So Graham goes and visits Lecter. When he goes there, an addition I did like to this movie is they have the psychiatrist Chilton in it again.
Well, he's like the head dude.
Yeah, so that was kind of cool. And Barney's in this movie again. Was he in Manhunter?
No,
Because there was a
didn't-
guy that dropped off a book.
I don't think so.
To
I don't
him.
think so.
Okay. And I do really like. I made this note that there's no. They didn't go, hey, this is an older. I mean, this is before this technology, but there's no de-aging in this movie, and it's so funny how much that doesn't distract me at all from seeing Chilton or Anthony Hopkins.
I actually thought that the actor was looking very good.
Yeah, he looked great
compared to when Silence of the Lambs came out.
But they both look like, oh yeah, it's been 20 years since the Silence of the Lambs. But gosh, just think twice about de-aging every time. And then think about it 2 more times because we don't really need it that
Save yourself
that
some
often.
money on your movie.
Yeah. There's like a part of me that even though it's maybe not the best thing, is I just kind of want people to start recasting actors when they're young again. Because I'm just like, ugh. I just don't want that trend to continue forever. So yeah.
They talk about the case. He's trying to get information from Hannibal because he's the top guy. And I do think it was interesting before that Harvey Keitel and Edward are talking about the house, and Edward realizes, oh, the real reason you wanted me to come back was to talk to Hannibal.
Yeah.
And I think Harvey Keitel's acting in that scene is really good because he's like, I'd do it if I could, but he's not going to talk to me. Like, he just kind of breaks.
I like that.
Yeah.
All the talking with Hannibal scenes, they suffer from 2 things. 1, we've seen Manhunter, and then 2, we've seen Silence of the Lambs. Because there is just something, again, weaponized so much about the Hannibal character on Silence of the Lambs that when you're watching this, like when he's going down to the cell and you're seeing the old set from Silence of the Lambs, you're just kind of like,
a gimmick.
You're like, this isn't really that tense for me.
Yeah.
Because I saw Clarice go through this, and it was much more emotional and dramatic.
Yeah, this is very indulgent. Because they got Anthony back, and they weren't sure if they could.
Yeah. So they talk to Hannibal. There is a scene where Hannibal is walking and he's connected to a chain, and I thought that change of location was kind of fun.
Yep.
It's so hard.
Let's just get to Ralph Fiennes. All this detective stuff is so boring.
Okay, cool.
So
Thank you.
It cuts to the film developing plant area that Ralph Fiennes works at.
Yeah,
and he I'm assuming meets Emily Watson. I mean, whatever. He talks to her. We find out she's blind. Shocker. We all knew that. I think that her acting she's just so good.
She's amazing.
Looks like a doll to me. I don't know why. There's that too. But so they have that other guy that kind of like interrupts their conversation, which is in the last movie in the story.
Yeah.
And in that movie, they make him seem like he's just a dude that's a coworker and is like, do you need a ride home to Reba? Because you don't have to take the bus if you don't have to. Seems like a very nice guy. In this movie, that character, he is obviously trying to pick up on her.
Yeah.
And I really like the actor they casted. He's I think like a typecasted, and I think he always does really good.
He's great. Yeah.
In that role. So he's trying to pick up on her. She's, you imagine she's always rejecting him. But this Ralph Fiennes guy is very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
He seems very dark and moody, and he's quiet, which is an interesting dynamic of someone who's blind, who has to rely on other senses, and he is so quiet.
Yeah.
Draws her in. They do that really well. They have like good chemistry in that way, these 2 actors.
Yeah.
Is that when he drives her home?
I think so. I mean, there's at some point he takes her to see the tiger.
Yeah. The tiger seems way less sedated in this scene in Manhunter.
Yeah, it's like growling and stuff. Well, not growling, but just breathing and kind of.
Yeah, I think, and then the scene when they're at his house or whatever, and that whole sequence is just like way more chilling in Manhunter, because he's watching a video of a family that he's going to plan on killing. And in Manhunter, they cut to it so often, and they keep replaying, like he's rewinding, playing the same image of the mom in a bathing suit.
Yeah.
And they're kind of doing it in this one too, but in that one, it's just like way more.
Yeah, and I think what hurts this scene in Red Dragon is he literally recreates shots from the Manhunter sequence.
Yeah.
So there's that shot where he's looking at her breasts, and then he's looking at her groin.
Yeah.
And in the Manhunter one, I was like squirming and just going, oh no. And in this one, I'm going, wait, you did the same shot?
Maybe just don't do it. Like, just redo something else. Like, do something else.
Yeah.
Like,
and I guess this begs the question. I mean, when something's based on a book, and I'm asking you, I have some thoughts, but when do you go, okay, I want to remake this, or we should remake this, even though it's been made into a movie?
I think that if you want to remake something that's already been done, you better have a good angle that's different.
That's exactly what I think. Yeah,
because that's why movies that, like, stories that are in the public domain get remade all the time because they're free. Like they don't have to get rights, so we get a ton of King Arthur movies, a lot of Robin Hood movies.
Yeah.
Great Gatsby this year became public domain, so I'm curious what's gonna happen with that. But and we get so many of those that they're not even, like, no one watches them anymore. I know I'm kind of getting into something else, but it just makes me think of, like, Invisible Man was remade last year by Lee Winnell.
Yeah. And there was a really strong take to that.
Yeah, and he had something to say about it.
And he spoke to our times and like a woman with being abused and stuff, and talking to that issue.
And I'm curious, I don't know if we've talked about it. We might have talked about it in our Insidious series, but I'm curious, like, because he's still, I would say, relatively new as a director, much more well known as a writer, Lee Winnell. And I'm curious if it's like that was a huge step for him of, like, we'll let you make a movie, whatever the studio is, I don't remember, but it has to be
Universal.
It has to be something that's free, or it has to be something where the rights won't be crazy.
Well, they have all those monster rights.
Oh, that's right.
So that is actually funny enough that you mentioned that. That was more like they sought him out and asked him to do an Invisible Man.
Because I could also see it being as, like, do you have a movie you want to make?
Yeah,
this
like,
is a budget. And he's like,
five things you can choose from.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't really have to rewrite the Invisible Man. I mean, of course he did above and beyond what we could ever ask for. But that was a really long-winded answer.
Yeah, well, and the thing that's interesting about what we were saying is the examples we used, you can go pretty vastly different. Whereas if you are following a book like this, it's plot-centric, how do you tell something different? And I think the answer is Little Women. Yeah. Because she did a lot of changes. From what I understand, I have not read the book, and I've only seen Greta Gerwig's Little Women. But I watched this, like, 40-minute video by Patrick Willems breaking down, like, what's the point of an adaptation kind of thing, much less one that is been made, like, 10 different versions of Little Women.
Doesn't he talk about in that video how she changed the format, like the timeline?
She
and that
changed
was, like, the biggest
how it
thing?
goes back and forth. And that was, and a lot of it was to show, like, the poetic nature of the story and the repetitiveness of their lives and stuff like that. Yeah. And then she also sets up the ending of Little Women, spoiler alert, to where it's like she goes to the publisher, and the publisher says, you can't end a story with a woman not being married. Mm-hmm. Or she has to either be dead or be married. Mm-hmm. And then Joe goes out and chases the guy and finds him in the rain, but then it cuts back to her and she's publishing the book. So she
says yes to it, but she keeps most of the rights. Like she negotiates. Like keep going.
But what's interesting about the ending, and I feel like it's right there, but I didn't actually get it, is that Greta Gerwig is saying, like, you can take this ending as literally like she goes off and she finds this guy and they start the school, or you can take it as this is like the ending to her book that she had to write, and that this didn't happen to her because it's so hard to explain. But I mean, Greta Gerwig's a genius, and you hear us talk about her all the time. We love her. But she had a strong take. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
Whereas this is just a retread.
Yeah.
Makes it hard to talk about the plot.
Well, it pales in comparison because all we can do, which is at a disadvantage in this movie, because all we can do is compare it to the one that's already been made. That's the issue that's the risk you take with remaking something.
Yeah.
So this scene in particular, when he's watching the video and Reba is there and they end up having sex in Manhunter, it is so chilling and weird and like you feel like you shouldn't be watching it. Kind of weird. And this is just like he is watching the video, she's there, she puts the moves on, and then Manhunter, they show that character isn't enjoying it, or he is like,
yeah, that was a weird touch.
He's like expressionless, but we don't even get that in this movie. They cut away from whatever Ralph Fiennes' reaction could be.
Yeah, and I don't know, it feels like in this movie too, which this is another way to do it. I'm not necessarily criticizing it, just pointing it out, that Ralph Fiennes is much more of like a mythological like serial killer crazy, whereas in Manhunter I feel like they kind of stripped away some of that stuff, and it's more like here's a strange person and this woman's wrapped up in it. I don't know if I'm expressing that right.
I think in Manhunter what I thought was more interesting is based on how they designed him, down to his costumes, down to where he lived. They kind of created this image of someone who is maybe into very modern things aesthetically. So then he's believes he's going to transform into the Red Dragon, and he's killing people to help to also make them transform. It's like, yeah, you do seem like a guy who would know that. When in this movie, there's an angle of he was abused as a kid by his grandma, and now he definitely has a lot of issues he has not worked through, and there is a Red Dragon as well. I don't really get how that factors in. And maybe I missed it.
No, I think that they actually do it more in this one, but it feels like
they focus on it more, but it just is like, it's almost like pick that he was abused or pick that, well, they kind of, whatever. You go ahead.
Yeah. No, it's hard to figure out why the one works and the other doesn't.
Yeah.
But I think like the Noonan character feels like maybe I've seen that guy walk down the street. The Ralph Fiennes character is like, oh, it's like this mansion. You could spot him from a mile away, whatever. Whereas, and I know it's kind of weird because I just said Ralph Fiennes looks great and he looks awesome, and then the other guy looks very scary. But the other one just felt like it had more of an edge of, this is a real story I could read, and I would read about in the papers and go, oh my gosh. And the other one was like, oh, this is a movie.
Yeah.
The Ralph Fiennes angle to it. There is this whole thing where he, which apparently is in the book, where he goes and sees the painting of the Red Dragon and then he eats the painting.
Mm-hmm. I found that interesting.
That was pretty interesting.
And there's definitely more of a struggle of him like fighting with the Red Dragon, like in his mind, like arguing with it.
Yeah, because he doesn't want to kill the girl.
And it's telling him to.
Yeah, and it's like, it's also one of those things where I'm like, oh, you're not trusting the audience. You're not like taking lessons from Hitchcock. You got to trust the audience, because I felt like in the previous movie, there was this feeling, and you even said it, I think, on the podcast, where you're like, maybe this would have been the girl that fixed him, but then he saw that guy try and take her home, and then he went crazy. Mm-hmm. But this movie, they have to like spell it out for you, like that he's about to, blow his brains out with the shotgun and stuff. And he goes, I don't want to kill her. And he's yelling at his grandma who's in his brain. And I just thought, okay, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
But
I
the
also
funny,
thought
go ahead.
I thought it was kind of funny in that scene when he's like tormented by it, and he's like about to kill himself, and then he doesn't, and then he looks at the picture, the reprint that he has of it, and it has the museum on it. It's as if he noticed that for the first time in his life. I think that is his epiphany of, oh, I'll just go there and eat it, or whatever his plan was. But I don't know. It just was like you said, it just was a movie.
Yeah.
It didn't get under my skin.
No. But the funny thing about it that I need to keep circling back to is I do think if you just watch this movie, just straight up watch it, and you did not watch Manhunter, you'd be like, oh, this is cool. So if you're listening to this right now and you're going like, man, they are really like ripping into this movie, but it's probably because you haven't seen Manhunter.
Yeah, I mean, we don't get a butt in Manhunter, but we get Ray Fiennes' butt in this one. Maybe a win. I'm joking, but yeah.
But I mean, it is kind of like, well, if someone remade The Godfather and you saw that and it was like a pretty good movie, you'd be like, well, that's cool. But then if you saw The Godfather, you'd go, oh, that's crappy.
Yeah.
I think it's really that. I mean, that's our big take.
Yeah.
And I do think because the Hannibal character at this point is getting so big in his legacy, to make the story that has him in it the least amount kind of it's like he's gotten too big for this story, at least the Anthony Hopkins version. So it's, you kind of are, the scenes that he's in feel like it's fan fiction almost.
Yeah.
And it almost, I mean, again, I am not in any way, like, Anthony Hopkins rules. He's amazing as Hannibal. He's done an excellent job in all three movies. And his performance in Silence of the Lambs is just unbelievable. But when I watched this, it was just like, I prefer Brian Cox's performance for this story a lot more. Because I just liked how William Peterson went in there, and there's just kind of this normal guy who somehow is just like way smarter than him. And there was something about the way that Brian Cox played it so just kind of calm and collected. But, immediately when he gets the phone, he pulls it off and like makes the calls and is just psychotic.
Yeah.
Whereas, of course, Hopkins is very theatrical in his performance.
Yeah.
It's just weird.
Mm-hmm.
It's so weird, and I feel like we skipped everything Edward Norton because it's all just really boring.
Well, all of his stuff is really the stuff that they keep the same, which makes sense because that's all the plot building. They do they have Philip Seymour Hoffman write an article and they give him false information, which leads to his kidnapping by Ray Fiennes. So there's the scene of him in the wheelchair. It's the same scene. Different setting, I guess. And then he's also in flames going down a street. Still pretty scary. Anytime someone's on fire stuck to a wheelchair, that's going to be pretty scary.
Yeah.
That's all the same. But maybe we should talk about like the big like climax.
Yeah.
That lasts forever.
So I think they thought to themselves, like, if we change the ending, then we've done a good job. Maybe that was their whole thought on this.
I don't know.
Because the ending is much different. Sort of. Not like ideologically, just like set piece wise. But there's a scene where the killer is with the blind lady and he clearly shoots himself in the head. Clearly. And she feels the head and she walks out. And I was kind of like, oh, this is weird. And I thought, okay. I was kind of checked out of the movie at this point, and I thought, okay, emotionally,
her reaction's crazy. It's like, oh, this is becoming a murder-suicide. Yeah. Interesting.
And I'm going, it seems like the story's done, but I feel very unresolved. Okay, I'm interested. Where are you taking this? Is this going to be some weird just note of uncertainty that you're going to end this movie on? No. He comes back like a supervillain in Star Wars who survives from the dead. And he attacks Will Graham at his house.
So there's a throwaway line, like Harvey Keitel calls him and says that the remains that they found in the burned house was not Ray Fiennes. It's this person
which was probably the guy who was trying to pick up the blind lady, right?
I don't know. He just leaves him there.
But it's just so weird
make it sound like, oh, he's been gone on vacation for a week, or people think that. It's like such a throwaway line that. I mean, you're probably supposed to feel like, wait, what?
It's just, I feel like it's very unearned, and the way they shot it, of course, they don't actually show us him shooting his brains, but he walks off camera, and I think the gun is in his mouth when he walks off camera. And then there's a gunshot. and then she feels his brain. It's like, so I guess we're supposed to believe that he takes the body and she doesn't notice it in any way.
Mhm.
And then
he
walks off screen with a gun in his
fast.
head and then shoots the body and then blows up his house. And then, goes to Florida. It just doesn't really, for a movie that's so like methodical, you're like, what?
I will have to say, before we get there, I do like the scene between Edward Norton and Emily Watson, where she's in the hospital, and he is telling her, you did not attract a freak, you attracted a man who had a freak on its back.
Yeah.
I thought that the, like, script-wise, that was very well done.
Yeah.
And then the acting was really good.
Then he follows it up with, but your hair looks really bad.
Yeah.
You got to fix your hair.
And then he's like, except, like, you're a great person, except for your hair. And it's like, where did that come from? That is so weird.
And I know it's supposed to be charming, but
it is
again,
not. It's like
it's
let me
Edward
give
Norton.
you a compliment and then backhand offense.
Yeah. Like, another actor could pull that off. Edward Norton can't pull that off. He needs...
Oh, this is what I said when we were watching the movie. I feel like Edward Norton is out of touch of... And I don't know this for sure. He just feels like someone who is out of touch with the common man. That's why it's hard to believe him in things when he's supposed to be like altruistic or whatever.
And come on the pod anytime, but...
Sure. But he just feels like a lot of what he did is stuff that he would never succumb to doing.
Yeah,
right. I think that that's like a dumb thought that I have, hearing that he is probably difficult.
Right.
And it's like, well, who was he to be difficult? And it's like, I don't know, he's an artist. Can't you be a little difficult? This is my internal struggle with this is how my brain talks to each other.
Okay, gonna blow past that.
Yeah.
So the killer shows up at Will Graham's house. He attempts to kill
his son
with
a piece of mirror.
There's like some shooting, but Edward, because in a previous scene, Harvey Keitel gave him his big old notebook, this big old thing of evidence. He just hands it to him, and you get to just take this home, this evidence. Like, you can just look at it, and you can get your fingerprints all over it and your saliva and your hair. We don't care.
Yeah, he's killed like 10 people. We're totally sure he hasn't killed anymore.
Yeah, we're sure there are no clues in here. This is like a keepsake for you.
Yeah.
So he opens it up and he's looking through and he's seeing all this stuff about the grandma, and he's seeing like, I'll cut it off if you pee in the bed again and stuff like that. So then the killer has Graham's son by mirror point. And he walks in, and I hated this scene. I absolutely hated it. Edward Norton looks at his son, and he starts going, he sees that he peed himself. And he goes, you peed yourself? I'm going to cut that thing off. You're no good. You're no good at nothing. You are the worst. And I don't like you, son. You're such a bad son. Replicating the grandma. And then Ralph Fiennes looks at him and is kind of goes, huh? And then he attacks him, which allows him the upper hand to kill him. Mm-hmm. And I just, like, the audacity of a father to just go, I'm going to risk my son's life by pulling this stunt and hope it works.
He's a profiling expert.
But also, like, the movie does this he says bad things to his son, and there's no repercussions to him doing that. There's not a scene where his son and him have like a little heart to heart. I don't know. When I was watching that, I'm like, I know what you're doing, but a little kid doesn't recover from that very quickly. Like, we need some closure on that.
It's definitely weird. It's definitely weird.
and then they're like, okay, we're all good to go. And that's the movie.
Yeah.
And isn't there something? Oh, they did. Oh, I hated this too. I hated this. They did like a comic book thing. This is not a comic book series where they're like, hey, Hannibal. This is how the movie ends. Hey, Hannibal, someone's here to visit you. She's fresh from the FBI. And it's
what's
like,
her
wink,
name?
wink, wink. Yeah, and then, he says, what's her name? And then it cuts to black. Come on, get out of here.
Yeah.
I don't want that kind of stuff in a serious adult drama.
Yeah, me neither.
That is a fun, like, Captain America. What? He's back or something? But no. And even then, usually it's too hammy.
Yeah.
The movie kind of is bad.
When you get to compare it to Manhunter.
And actually, I do think that the last half hour of the movie, even outside of Manhunter, I think if you were watching the movie, you would just go, oh, this kind of sucks. And it brings it down to like, I was at a 7, now it's a 6.
Yeah.
But when you've seen Manhunter, it's like, oh, this movie is like a 4 or a 3. It's just director for hire is how I view it.
Yeah, they got a really good cast, so it's a good movie. You know,
Right,
it's
right.
like base level good. It's a watchable, good movie. But whatever.
Yeah, so that's Red Dragon. Next week, we're going to cover Hannibal Rising, and then we'll be finished with the Hannibal franchise.
Do we announce the next series?
I think we do. Do you want to?
No, because I'm always afraid I'm not remembering it correctly.
So, folks, we're very excited about this. This is going to take most of this year.
And you're like, what could it be? Maybe it's DC. Maybe it's Fast and Furious. Maybe it's another one that I can't remember.
Star
Wars.
Wars. It's kind of one of those. So what we're doing, folks, is we are going to be exploring the character of Mr. Bruce Wayne himself, Batman. So what we're going to do, I'll lay it out for you because I think it's fun and exciting. We're going to cover the first 4 Batman movies, which is Batman, Batman Returns, Batman Forever, and Batman and Robin. We have an insane guest on the guests, yes, that are comic book experts. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you that much. So we have that. Then we're gonna take a slight break after we do those movies, and then we're hitting Nolan's Dark Knights, and then we're gonna take another slight break, and then we're doing something we've been waiting. What this podcast has kind of been building up to in a lot of ways because of our namesake, Marvel, MPU. We're going to be doing the DC extended universe.
I kind of forgot it was ending with that, but I do remember feeling like that was the trade-off to do Batman.
Yeah, because I think we really, to talk about it fully, you know, we have to kind of go through it all. Pending stuff on the spin-off solo movies. I don't know if we're going to cover Joker or
Jonker
or the Batman. I'm not sure if we're going to do that. So we'll see.
Talk about Robert again.
Yeah, I just really don't want to watch Jonker again. I hate that movie. But if you sign up for Patreon and send us a message, if we get 10 people to sign up and they all send me a message that says Jonker, then we'll do it. Okay. But it has to be new patrons. They can't be old ones. We don't have to be
nice about it.
Yeah. Well, we're going to tear the movie apart because it's a bad movie. But folks, go to www.patreon.com/Micah McCaw, MICAHMCCAW, and sign up for anywhere from $3 to $10 a month, and get our monthly episode. That's only available on Patreon, where we cover movies that only have 2 entries. So this month it was Patreon chosen, and it is Zoolander that we're covering this month. Big change of pace from Hannibal. So we're having fun over there. And then next month will be Zoolander 2. And then the month after that, we're going to do the Adam West Batman movie. Mm-hmm. That'll be only on Patreon. So you should go over there. It supports us. It helps us out. And it means a lot to us. Mm-hmm. And it's fun.
Yeah.
So cup of coffee. But next week, we got to see Hannibal rise, just like we had to see Han Solo get his name.
Watch him rise like Icarus flew too close to the sun.
Who's that peeking behind the bars? That's Hannibal. Who's that played by 4 different stars? That's Hannibal. And whose face is detachable? That's Hannibal. And who's everybody's favorite cannibal? That's Hannibal.